one of the hardest things for humans to do, and especially us men, is to look ourselves dead on in the mirror and hold ourselves accountable. It is one of the most difficult things to do, but also one of the most important things to do. And I'm going to tell you why. Hey guys, welcome back to the Anchor Show. My name is Andrew and I am glad you're here. So today, we're going to be having a very honest conversation. All right. So I need all the bros to come to the front of the line. We're going to talk. We're going to talk about accountability, right? This is a very important topic and a very important character trait that we all need to master. I'm going to be discussing what it means to be accountable, right? So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to define accountability. I'm going to look at what it means to be accountable. Then I'm going to be looking at what are the costs of avoiding accountability, right? I'm also going to look at why do men struggle to be accountable? And I'm going to look at the pillars of becoming accountable. And then lastly, I'm going to be looking at the value of being accountable and why it's worth it. All right. So let's dive right into it. All right. So let's define accountability. I'm going to read you the definition, right? And what it says, accountability is owning your action or inaction, having integrity, responding to your commitments, even when it's uncomfortable. In other words, it's basically being true to yourself. You know, you said you're going to do something, you stay true to yourself and you do it, you get it done, right? That's essentially what it means to be accountable. And we struggle with it. Some of us struggle with, just being able to hold ourselves accountable. But before we get into the struggles, why is it important to be accountable, right? Accountability is both internal and external, right? What do I mean is, from an internal perspective, that's me, that's you holding yourself, me holding myself accountable for my action or inaction, right? If I did something wrong, or if I was supposed to do something that I didn't do, I said I was going to do something and I didn't do it, etc., right? Internal accountability is me looking myself in the mirror, whether literally or figuratively, but me staying true to myself, being honest with myself to say, hey, I said I was going to do this thing and I didn't get to do it, right? That's internal accountability. External accountability comes from the people around us, right? Whether that be a partner, whether that be parent, a child, a co-worker, friend, whomever. But it comes from people around us, right? Outside of ourselves, who hold us accountable for things that we said we were going to do and didn't do, or things that or maybe it's just something you did someone wrong, right? You did something bad, right? You did something you should not have done, and your action hurt someone's feelings, or cause someone pain. And it's being able to look yourself in the mirror and take ownership of that action or inaction from an internal perspective. That builds your self-esteem, right? It builds you up, because it's like, when you can reflect inwards and you look at what you did wrong, or you look at where you fell short, you now have the building blocks. You know what you need to fix, to correct, so that you can improve and not make those mistakes again, right? From an external perspective, when someone holds you accountable and you respond, right? So for example, let's say someone offered you a position, right? And this person's at a job, and this person said, I'm going to be at your home at 6 o'clock to pick you up, right? At 6 o'clock, you're downstairs, you're outside, ready to go, right? That person is going to look at you as a man of your word. And this is somebody trustworthy. This is somebody I can rely on, right? But if they show up 6 o'clock, 6:05, 6:10, 6:15, and you're not ready, that you're already starting to break down that trust. If there was any trust in the first place, right? You're going to start breaking down because you haven't kept your word, right? But then in a situation like that, what do? Do you just play it off and lie about it, or just throw it under the rug? No, right? You own it. You say, hey, look, man, that was my bad, right? That was my bad. I whatever your excuse is, your alarm didn't go off, something happened, you slept in, whatever the case might be, but you're standing up and you're telling this person, hey, that was my bad, my apologies, I knew that I told you 6 o'clock and I was 15 minutes late, and that is totally my fault, and I'm really sorry about that, right? Or I apologize about that, right? That's you standing up and owning your action or your inaction and just taking accountability and ownership of it, right? That guy, he's gonna be annoyed and frustrated, because if I'm in that position, if I'm the one that's picking that guy up, I'm gonna be annoyed and frustrated because you told me 6, I told you 6, we agreed on 6, and then here, 15 minutes later, you're just getting, you're just coming out. So yeah, I'm gonna be annoyed with that situation, but at least I'm gonna respect the fact that you owned it. I'm gonna respect the fact that you stood up and you own your shortcomings, right? So that is the value of being accountable, both from an internal perspective as well as externally, right? Now, what are the costs of avoiding accountability, right? When we need to be accountable and we are avoiding it, some people like to shove things under the rug. They don't like to address it. They don't like to face it, right? Especially when it has to do with them, right? Especially when you're looking in that mirror and the mirror is looking right back at you, right? Some people have a hard time with dealing with that, and so they avoid it. So what are the costs of avoiding accountability? Let's look at that. When we avoid accountability, relationships suffer, opportunities can be lost, your self-esteem will take a dip, and you're going to erode trust amongst yourself and others, right? Those are the kind of things that can take place, right? When I spoke about the example I gave earlier with the guy who needed to be picked up at 6 for the job, right? If you're dealing with some people and you told that person 6 and then you showed up and that person showed up at 6 and you're not ready, they're gone. Not even 601, 602, they are gone. So if you were truly in need of that job and you didn't show up, guess what? That's your lost, because that person is not going to wait, right? There are some people who are very serious like that. They're not going to sit there and wait for 15 additional minutes, right? So that's how opportunities can be lost. Now let's talk about just breaking of trust and relationships essentially like falling apart. Now let's look at a situation where, let's say you and your wife, right? And there's something that you need to get done for the family, right? Whatever that is, it could be anything that you need to get done for the family. And you told your wife, right? You have an agreement and you said, okay, I'm gonna get this done by Friday, right? Here comes Friday, here comes Saturday, here comes Sunday, it's not done, right? Now, if this is an anomaly, if this only happens one time, a reasonable wife would be like, okay, no big deal. When are you gonna get it done? Oh, my bad, I'll get it done tomorrow, right? And then you get it done, fine. If this is a chronic situation where you are always making promises and coming up short, or, you're just not following through and staying committed to your responsibility, that's going to erode trust. That is going to erode trust. And then in a scenario where this is between you and your wife and the trust is being eroded, it's slowly breaking down, that can take a hit on your self-esteem, right? You can start looking inwards and feeling less than, feeling like, man, I'm always coming up short, or it can start to feel that way. And then that's from an internal perspective. But what if externally you're being pressured because you're not holding yourself accountable? You're not responding to your commitments. You're not staying true to your words, right? Then you have that external pressure as well as the pressure you apply on yourself. That can hit your self-esteem really hard, right? So that is the cost of avoiding accountability, right? That's why you don't want to avoid it. I know it's easy to just shove it under the rug and move on, but you don't want to avoid it. You are better off just facing it head on. All right. So why do we struggle? Why do we struggle? Why do men struggle to hold themselves accountable, right? Let's look at that. Some of the reasons why men struggle has to do with societal pressure, right? I did a video a while back on men who are tired of being strong, right? So what do I mean by societal pressure, right? We have these expectations of us as men, right? From our family, wife, children, parents, community, friends, boss, whatever, right? There are a lot of expectations rest on our shoulders as men, right? We're expected to be strong. We're expected to be, in control of everything. And the honest truth is that not everybody is designed that way. Some people can handle a few things at a time and master it. Some people can handle multiple things at a time and master it. Others can only manage maybe one thing at a time. And they might not even be able to master that one thing, right? So when you have this societal pressure and expectation of us needing to show up all the time and show up correct and get it right and do our best, right? Sometimes avoiding accountability is the best way to go about it, right? You were supposed to do something, you didn't get to do it, and because you don't want to seem weak or you don't want to seem as someone who cannot, keep their word, you either lie about it or you avoid it, right? You just avoid it, or you avoid that person, right? If I don't have to see them, I don't have to deal with that issue, right? Because the expectation is too much, the pressure is too great, right? And you're just incapable or unable of meeting all of those expectations and obligations, right? So you avoid it. That's one of the biggest reasons why men struggle. There's also the idea of being too soft or being too weak. Now, let me as a mental health therapist, I'm gonna throw this in here, right? If you're a guy who is struggling with any sort of mental illness or any sort of like emotional disorders, right? And you are aware of it. You're not in denial. Let's say you are aware of it, right? You know that the accountable thing to do is to go and seek help. You're going to look yourself in the mirror. You're going to say, well, this is a struggle. I'm having an issue with this particular thing. I need to go seek help, right? But again, looking at that external factor from society, especially with stigma surrounding mental health and mental illnesses, you avoid it. Right? And that issue in the long term could get worse. It could become more of a problem than it really needed to be because you chose to avoid and ignore that issue. And so that's the reason why some of us men struggle with stepping into accountability, right? But on this channel, we don't make excuses. We identify issues that we all deal with and we all face and we all struggle with, right? But if you're new to this channel, let me just say, we solve problems, right? We present solutions. If you've been with me from the beginning and you've been watching my videos, you know this, right? We fix problems. So how do we deal with being able to hold ourselves accountable and keep that into practice, right? So that brings me to the pillars of becoming accountable, right? One of the first thing is clarity of values and commitment, right? You have to be clear. Who are you, right? What do you stand for, right? What are your personal values? Like, what's important to you, right? Family, for some people, career, children, right? Spouse, right? Whatever, right? Be clear about your commitments and your values, right? That's the first thing. That's the first pillar, is to be clear, right? The next thing is to track your progress, right? So how do we put that into action? Let's look at it. So you said, I'm going to commit to losing 20 pounds before the end of the year. That is your clear commitment, right? You've identified that and it's clear. And then you're going to track your progress. Meaning, well, for one, you're going to make sure that you're getting up and doing what you're supposed to do. You're going to have a plan outlined, right? I mean, you're going to run on Monday, you're going to lift weights on Tuesday, whatever the plan is, you're going to have a plan, right? Then you're going to track it. How you can do that is, if you say that you're going to do this if you're going to be working out 4 days per week, at the end of each week, you're going to look back, how many days did I work out this week? Did you actually stay true to the 4 days? Did you do less? Did you do more? Right? So that's what you're going to do. You're going to track your progress, right? The next thing that you're going to do is embrace what many would call failure, right? And feedback. And when I say embrace failure, let me be very clear. I'm not saying that, we're going to just be mediocre and when you fail, you're just like, oh, it's so great to fail. No. What I mean is give yourself grace. Give yourself grace, right? That's the most important piece, because in today's world, let's be real, in this day and age where people are struggling just to exist, we're not talking about to pay bills. No, we're talking about just to exist, just to live. People are struggling every single day, right? Many of us men have to be working multiple jobs or have side hustles, to try and pay the bills or just to try and keep up. So with all of that being said, with all these external factors, right? Let's say you have one job. I'm going to look at a guy that only has one job, but he works 10 hours per day. But from the moment he leaves his home and come back home, it's 10 hours, right? It can be difficult for you to squeeze in a 30 to 40 minute workout on any of those days that you come home from work or before you go to work. Let's be honest. It can be very difficult. So what do I mean by embrace failure and feedback, or in other words, give yourself some grace, right? If you set your goal and commitment for 4 days per week, but you only manage to do 3 or even 2, give yourself some grace, right? I'm not saying accept mediocrity, but give yourself some grace, because we know that it's difficult, right? We know that you're trying. And so as long as you took a step forward, that's the key thing. That is the key thing, right? You took a step forward. You said you was going to do 4, you only did 2. Now, here's the kicker. You're going to look at the end of the week, you're going to look at how many days you did, why you only did 2 or 3 versus the 4 that you committed to, right? You're going to look at that and you're going to analyze and assess, and you're going to understand why, right? Maybe one of the days you felt lazy and you didn't feel like doing it. Maybe things were just hectic and busy and you just weren't able to, right? Whatever the case is, you assess, you understand why, and then now you have the ability to fix that situation, to correct that situation, right? Because you know what prevented you from doing all 4. And more than likely, this is something that you can correct. So now you go ahead and make that adjustment, right? So that's what it means to embrace failure, or in other words, like I said, to give yourself grace, and also to embrace feedback, right? If someone is giving you constructive criticism or just constructive feedback, embrace it. We're not perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. No one is, right? So if I'm falling short in something, and a friend or a mentor or a boss or whomever says to me like, hey, look, man, I can appreciate your effort in this thing or what you're doing, but you're not doing it quite exactly how it is supposed to or how I expect you to. So this is how I want you to do. This is how you can fix it. Okay. All right, cool. Thanks. All right. And you make that adjustment, right? So that's just embracing feedback and giving yourself grace. All right. The next thing is to be consistent. Be consistent, be consistent, be consistent, be consistent, right? As long as you're taking a step forward, that is the most important thing, right? Consistency for me on this YouTube journey is a huge deal. And this is why I'm doing this now versus many years ago, right? Because if you go listen to my previous videos, you you'll know that I wanted to do this YouTube thing for a while, right? I felt like it's a calling, and this is something that I must do, right? And I've attempted to do this in the past, but it didn't really go anywhere, right? It didn't. I wasn't ready, right? But now that I am ready, I'm able to be consistent, right? Because for those of you who are subscribers, who have become accustomed to me dropping my 2 videos per week, that is an expectation that I have laid out. I have to hold myself accountable by being consistent to make sure that I'm doing everything I need to do to present my 2 videos per week, right? Consistency is key. It's taking a step forward each time, as long as you're taking a step forward each time. Now, with that being said, if I were to have a week where I was only able to do 1 video versus 2, guess what? I'm not gonna beat myself up. I'm gonna give myself grace. Why? Because I was consistent. I took a step forward. I needed to take 2 steps, but I only took 1. Circumstances, life happens, right? I'm gonna give myself grace. I'm definitely not gonna beat myself up because I fell short. I'm gonna hold myself accountable. I'm gonna look in the mirror and try to understand why or what happened, and make sure that I can get ahead of that situation so it does not happen again. But I'm for sure giving myself grace. All right. So those are my pillars of what it takes to become accountable, right? And then the last thing is, why is accountability worth it? Why does it matter, right? How does it pay off? When you hold yourself accountable, right? Come close, bros. When you hold yourself accountable, you build trust with yourself and with others. You can improve relationships. You can improve your self-esteem. You raise your standards. And more importantly, you become respected, right? If you weren't already respected, you will become respected because you are a man of your word. When you say you're gonna do something, you show up and you get it done. And you get it done on time, in a timely manner, right? And you do it right. You are gonna be respected. People are gonna hold you at a very high standard because you set those standards, right? That's why it's worth it. That's why being accountable pays off, right? And you're building yourself up as this person who, I like to call a high value. It is one of the pillars of being a high value man, right? If you want to be considered a high value man, a high value person, that's one of the pillars of being high value, is by being accountable. You respect yourself, others respect you, right? So I know that it is a difficult thing to do. You know that too, but it is a necessary thing to do, right? It looks good on us. It looks good on me. It looks good on you, right? When we're accountable, you say, hey, my bad. That was me, my bad, right? I'll make sure that doesn't happen again. I'll fix that, right? You at work, you messed up, you made a mistake. They checked you on it, they correct you on it, you own it, you say, yeah, that was right, that was my bad, and you fix that situation and you do your best to not repeat that, you're gonna be respected. And let's be honest, you've all dealt with someone who have done something they should not have done, and instead of taking accountability of their action, they BS. They beat around the bush. They come up with all kinds of story instead of just saying, yeah, that was my bad, right? That's annoying. That is annoying. Very, very annoying. Let's be honest, right? So let's not be that guy. Let's be that high value man who knows how and when to be accountable for yourself and for others. All right, that is it for today, guys. I really do hope that you took some value from this video. Until the next one, like I always like to say, let us continue to grow, evolve, and transform into the best version of ourselves. And also, if you haven't already subscribed to this channel, please do so. All right, not only does it help my channel to grow and motivate me to continue to give you these gems, but it's also going to be beneficial for you, right? Because I do this for you, for inspirational and motivational purposes. So I do appreciate the subscription. Thank you so much. See you in the next one. Peace.